Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
You know what? Let's just get straight into it. No preamble, no warm-up. That right there, a six-time All-Star, a two-time champion, one of the most decorated players in WNBA history, going scorched earth on social media after being cut loose mid-season, that right there is not a business decision. That is not a roster move. That is a war. And the battlefield? Indianapolis, Indiana, the home of the Fever. Welcome back to Street Hoops. I'm Dre Fiver. Strap in, because today we are going places the mainstream sports media is too scared to go. We are pulling back the curtain on what is really happening inside the Indiana Fever organization, and I promise you, by the time this video is done, you are going to see this franchise in a completely different light. Let me start with something that should have gotten way more attention than it did. When the Indiana Fever made the decision to bring Stephanie White back as head coach in November 2024, it was celebrated as a masterstroke. The front office was applauded. Analysts were gushing. White had just come off back-to-back playoff appearances with the Connecticut Sun, earning WNBA Coach of the Year honors along the way. She was disciplined, she was proven, she was a winner. A Hoosier native returning home to restore order and build something real. The narrative wrote itself, what nobody wanted to ask, and I mean nobody because asking it might have ruined the feel-good moment, was a simple but devastating question. What happens when you take the most defensively rigid, structurally obsessed, hierarchy-driven coach in the league and hand her a roster built around one of the most anarchic, free-flowing offensive talents the sport has ever seen? What happens when iron meets electricity? You are about to find out. Because here's the thing about Stephanie White that her resume tells you loud and clear. This is a coach who was forged in discipline. According to her documented coaching history, during her 2 seasons with the Connecticut Sun, the team ranked first and second in defensive rating across the entire league. First and second. Defense isn't just a strategy for Stephanie White. It is a religion. It is the language she speaks, the culture she builds, and the standard she holds everyone to. No exceptions, no asterisks, no superstar exemptions. And Dre's personal opinion? I respect that. Deeply. Coaches who have a genuine identity, who know what they believe and refuse to compromise it, those coaches build dynasties, but only, and this is the critical caveat, only when their roster is built to match that identity. The Indiana Fever were not that roster. Not entirely. Not even close. Now let me paint you a picture. It's the 2025 preseason. Stephanie White is installing her system. Her defensive rotations. Her offensive sets. The meticulously structured spacing that defined Connecticut's success. And sitting across from her in the film room is Caitlin Clark. Let me be clear. There is zero evidence of any dramatic confrontation, any screaming matches, any public blow-up between Clark and White. Zero. What there is, documented, on the record, in multiple verified reports, is a genuine philosophical tension that played out in the most public way possible, through the media. As reported by multiple outlets covering the Fever heading into the 2026 season, White began openly discussing her plan to use Caitlin Clark off the ball more frequently. Now, on the surface, that sounds like smart basketball. Spread her around, let the defense chase her through screens, reduce her physical burden over a long season. And White defended it publicly, saying, and I'm paraphrasing a real quote here, that using a player as gifted as Clark off the ball is, in her words, the ultimate compliment. Because Clark commands so much defensive attention that moving her without the ball creates chaos. Fine. Reasonable. Smart even. But here's where it gets interesting, because Clark did not let that narrative sit unchallenged. Before a preseason game, Clark told reporters directly, and again I'm working from verified coverage, that she was going to be the primary ball handler. That was never going to change. She was calm, she was measured, but she was also unambiguous. Dre's read on that? That's Clark drawing a line in the sand, politely, professionally, but unmistakably, she is the engine of this team. She knows it. White knows it. The front office knows it. The question was whether White's system could accommodate that reality or whether it would be a source of friction all season long. And when the season actually played out in 2025, we got our answer, partly, because Clark only played 13 games due to injury. 13, which means White barely got to coach her at all. The dynamic everyone was watching so closely never fully developed. It was like they loaded a movie, it buffered for 3 minutes, and then the power went out. We got the trailer, but not the film. But while the Clark-White dynamic was simmering on the back burner, The story that actually did explode, documented in real time for the world to see, was Bonner. And this is the one that I cannot stop thinking about, because this is where the source material everyone is talking about finds its most legitimate, most verified anchor. Bonner was signed by the Fever in February 2025 on a one-year deal worth $200,000. She came with Stephanie White from Connecticut, where they had spent 2 seasons together. She knew the system. White trusted her. The Fever's young core was supposed to learn from her. Caitlin Clark herself, speaking to reporters early in the season, called Bonner the strongest voice in their locker room. Think about that. Caitlin Clark, who is not in the business of giving out compliments she doesn't mean, called this woman the strongest voice in the room. This was the veteran presence that was going to bridge the gap between White's structure and the younger players' creativity. This was the cornerstone of the whole cultural project. And then she stopped playing. 9 games in, she stepped away for what the organization listed as personal reasons. No clarity, no timeline, no communication to teammates, apparently. Because as reported by The Mirror and multiple other outlets, Lexi Hull later revealed that the locker room was completely blindsided. Hull said, again paraphrasing verified quotes, that she had been incredibly excited to finally have a player at her position she could look up to, someone who had won at this level, and then she randomly left. Hull said the team was all just standing there saying, "What happened?" That is not the reaction of a team that saw something coming. That is the reaction of a locker room that got ambushed. It later emerged, as reported by Front Office Sports and confirmed by CBS Sports, that Bonner had no interest in returning to the Fever. She was angling for a trade to either the Phoenix Mercury or the Atlanta Dream. The Fever tried to find a trade partner and came up empty, so they waived her. Fever general manager Amber Cox told reporters that Bonner had expressed her dissatisfaction as early as 9 or 10 games into the season, and that the organization had actively looked for trade options before ultimately having no choice but to release her. And here is where Stephanie White's reaction tells you everything about her character and her standards. White said publicly she was disappointed by Bonner's decision. Disappointed. That is a loaded word coming from a coach of White's disposition. It is professional, it is measured. But make no mistake, that is not the word of someone who shrugged and moved on. That is the word of someone who felt let down. And then Bonner fired back. On Instagram, publicly. She wrote, "And these words are real, they are documented, they were widely reported. A quitter. Nah, never been that." And then she added something that should send a chill down the spine of every Fever fan. She wrote, "But when the time comes, let's just make sure the apologies are just as loud as the disrespect." Now I need everybody to pause on that for a second, because that is not just venting. That is a promise. That is a woman who feels wronged, who has receipts, and who is letting the world know that at some point, the full story is coming. Dre's personal take? When a player of Bonner's stature, 6-time All-Star, 16-year veteran, 2-time champion, goes on Instagram and posts something like that, she is not being reckless. She is being deliberate. She knows exactly what she's doing. And the fact that she hasn't spelled it out completely yet tells me there's more to this story than anyone has officially confirmed. Now let's step back and get some context, because this is where I want to bring everything together and show you why this situation is more complex than any single narrative can capture. The source material circulating online about the Fever frames everything that happened in 2025 as a deliberate, calculated purge. Stephanie White systematically eliminating players who challenged her authority. And look, as a content creator, I understand the appeal of that framing. It's clean, it's dramatic, it's satisfying. But here's what the verified record actually shows. And I think the verified record is plenty dramatic on its own, without needing to manufacture a conspiracy. What we know for certain is this. Before the 2025 season even began, the Fever made their standard preseason roster cuts, releasing Bree Hall, Jillian Allen, Yvonne Ejim, and Jalen Brown, all standard cap and depth decisions documented by Sports Illustrated and multiple WNBA transaction trackers. Nothing controversial there. Those are the kinds of moves every team makes every preseason. Then came Bonner mid-season, and that one was anything but standard. That was a high-profile, high-drama departure that blindsided the locker room, produced public statements from both sides, and left real questions about what exactly went wrong between a coach and a player who had just spent 2 successful seasons together. And then on top of all that, you had the Clark off-ball usage debate generating its own low-grade tension before the 2026 season even began. Because here's the brutal reality of coaching in the WNBA in 2025, and it's something I think gets lost in all the drama. Stephanie White took over a franchise that, the year before, was giving up nearly 88 points a game on defense, ranking 11th out of 12 teams in the league. 11th. They were a sieve, and White's entire identity as a coach, the thing that made Connecticut a force, was built on suffocating defense. She came to transform the culture, and transformation is never comfortable. Transformation always produces friction. It always produces someone who liked the old way better, someone who decides the new direction isn't for them. Is that what happened with Bonner? In part, almost certainly, Bonner came off the bench after 3 starts. Her minutes were reduced. A legendary veteran who had been a star for 16 years found herself in a diminished role. And the Fever, by the way, were better for it on paper. They finished 24-20, a franchise record, and made the WNBA semifinals even with Caitlin Clark missing most of the season. The system worked, even in the chaos, which is what makes this whole story so layered. Because you can simultaneously argue that White made the right basketball decisions, and that the human cost of those decisions was real, messy, and publicly uncomfortable in ways that don't normally get discussed. Kelsey Mitchell herself told reporters in what was described as an emotional locker room interview that the injury crisis left the team feeling completely demoralized. She said they were all flooded with tears and didn't even fully understand why they were crying. That is not the language of a happy, harmonious environment. That is a team that went through something real and difficult in 2025. And yet, and this is the part that cuts through all the noise, they still won 24 games. They still won the Commissioner's Cup. They still made the playoffs and pushed to the semifinals. Whatever was happening internally, whatever the friction points were between coaching philosophy and individual player expectations, the results spoke a very different language than the drama. And that brings me to the piece of this puzzle that I think tells you more about Stephanie White than anything else. Aaliyah Boston posted a video to her Instagram stories showing the locker room after a massive win over the New York Liberty, the defending champions. And in that video, Stephanie White is dancing, lip-syncing, completely unbothered, completely comfortable, completely herself. And the internet, the very same internet that had been writing think pieces about her cold, authoritarian coaching style, lost its mind in the best possible way. Fans were commenting things like, "Y'all sure Steph lost the locker room?" And that is a fair question, because a coach who has lost her locker room does not dance with her players. A coach who has lost her locker room does not get invited into those moments. You earn your way into those videos. And Stephanie White had clearly earned it. Dre's opinion, stated plainly, the narrative of Stephanie White as a ruthless purge artist dismantling the Fever to satisfy her own ego is not supported by the verified record. What is supported is a coach with uncompromising standards, who made decisions, some of which were painful for the people involved, in service of a cultural vision that ultimately produced results. Now, could she have handled the Bonner situation differently? Could there have been better communication, better role clarity, better management of a veteran's expectations coming off 2 years of working together? Probably. Almost certainly. These are human beings, not chess pieces. And the human cost of difficult organizational decisions is real, regardless of whether the scoreboard ultimately validates the strategy. But the framing of this as a locker room in total meltdown, with conspiracies and purges and shadow wars, the documented record is considerably messier and considerably more nuanced than that. What we can say heading into the 2026 season is this: the stakes have never been higher for everyone involved. Caitlin Clark is back healthy, coming off a dominant run at the FIBA World Cup qualifying tournament, where she averaged 11 points and led the entire competition in assists. She went 5-0 with Team USA. She won tournament MVP. She is locked in. She is hungry. And now she is walking back into an Indiana Fever program that has a new piece in Raven Johnson, the first overall pick in the 2026 WNBA draft, whose game is built on doing all the little things that complement a superstar ball handler rather than compete with one. The front office made that pick deliberately. They are trying to build around Clark in a way that doesn't stress the system. Smarter drafting, smarter role definition, smarter management of expectations before they explode into drama. And Stephanie White? She now gets a full season with the player she barely got to coach in 2025. 13 games. That's all she had, and she still won 24. Think about what this woman does with a full roster and a healthy franchise cornerstone. Think about what the Clark-White partnership looks like when it actually has time to develop, to breathe, to find its rhythm. The off-ball usage debate, the primary ball handler declaration, the philosophical tension, all of it gets resolved on the court, one way or another, over 44 games. No amount of social media speculation, no amount of anonymous insider whispering is going to settle what happens in a real game with real stakes. But here's what I know, what I believe, what Dre is putting on record right now. The Indiana Fever are the most watched, most discussed, most emotionally invested franchise in women's basketball, bar none, and that comes with a price. Every decision gets magnified, every roster move becomes a narrative, every coaching statement gets dissected for subtext. DeWanna Bonner got waived mid-season, and people built entire conspiracy theories around it. Stephanie White talked about moving Clark off the ball, and half the fan base acted like she'd committed a crime. This is what it means to be the most visible team in the league. You operate in a fishbowl, and every crack in the glass gets projected onto a stadium screen. So when you read about locker room drama and coaching purges and philosophical warfare inside the Fever organization, I need you to apply the same filter I do. Start with what's verified. Start with what's documented. Build your analysis on facts, and then let the drama inform the texture, not the other way around. Because the verified story of the 2025 Indiana Fever? A 24-win season with 5 players lost to injury, a Commissioner's Cup title, a deep playoff run, a coach who danced in the locker room and also made hard decisions that hurt people's feelings, and a franchise on the genuine cusp of something historic. That story is dramatic enough. That story doesn't need embellishment. It needs understanding. And that, Street Hoops Nation, is exactly what we're here to give you. Every week, no filter, no agenda. Just the truth, the whole truth, and the basketball context that connects all of it. Look, if you made it this far, you already know what to do. Hit that like button right now. I'm talking right now, not in a minute. Right now. Smash it. Leave me a comment below. I want to know what you think about Stephanie White's coaching style. Is she building a dynasty, or is she too rigid to handle a superstar roster? Drop your take below, because those comment sections are where the real conversation happens, and I read every single one. And if you are not already subscribed to Street Hoops, tap that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we drop content that goes places the mainstream won't. I'm Dre Fiver. This has been Street Hoops, and we are just getting started.